Hi, this is Arthur, and this is a summary and explanation of the story of all the Archon quests released in the game Genshin Impact version 5.6. The Traveler and Paimon return to Mondstadt for the Windbloom Festival. They speak to Catherine, who says something unusual is going on in Mondstadt. They look around and a lot of citizens are not acting like themselves. Kaya shows up and asks them to meet with Jean. They head to the Knights of Favonia's headquarters and meet with Jean, who says Albedo is about to be put on trial for murder. They head to the courtroom and the proceedings begin. They hear testimony from witnesses who saw Albedo burying 2 human bodies outside the city and found human teeth and a femur at those locations. No one can confirm Albedo's location at the time the witnesses saw him, so he lacks an alibi. More evidence is introduced showing Albedo has been conducting experiments related to living beings, providing a motive. In light of the evidence, the court finds Albedo guilty of murder, though time will be allotted for appeals or objections. Rosaria appears and relays a message to the Traveler to meet with someone at Snarsnatch Cliff. The Traveler heads over and meets with Venti and Dahlia. Dahlia is a deacon in the Church of Favonius, presides as an assessor in Albedo's trial, and is the herald of the Anemo Archon. As a herald, Dahlia's job is just to relay messages from Venti to the public. The 3 of them discuss how Albedo is secretly a synthetic being and how Rhine-Daughter and Alice brought him to Mondstadt. Side note, Rhine-Daughter and Alice are both members of the Hexenzirkel, an organization of powerful witches. Rhine-Daughter created Albedo, and Alice is Klee's mom. Rhine-Daughter is also one of the 5 sinners, who are powerful Conrians Dainsleif blames for Conria's destruction. Venti asks them to help out Albedo and gives them a Dodo communication device so they can keep in touch. Side note, this device was introduced in a prior quest and was originally created by Alice. They head back to Mondstadt and meet with Kaya and Jean. Kaya says he'll submit an appeal for Albedo and asks the Traveler to investigate the situation. They head to Albedo's office and find maps indicating 3 locations. 2 of the locations were where the witnesses testified to seeing Albedo burying bodies. The Traveler suspects they may find a body at the 3rd location. Just then, Venti calls and the Traveler updates him on what they found. They end the call and find a knight named Miles eavesdropping. They tell Miles to forget anything he might have heard and head to the 3rd location. Once there, they find a dug-up hole but no body. They head back to Mondstadt and update Jean on what's happened. Jean thanks them for their efforts and says Albedo asked for a retrial. A few days later, the 2nd trial begins and a knight named Hertha represents the prosecution while Kaya will represent Albedo. Hertha says the teeth and femur were analyzed and they are indeed human. They've also discovered more of Mondstadt's citizens are missing, and forensic analysis proves the teeth and femur belong to one of those missing citizens. Hertha calls another witness who saw Albedo burying bodies and submits the maps the Traveler found earlier as evidence against Albedo. Jean asks Albedo about the evidence and Albedo maintains his innocence. Jean asks the Traveler what they found at the 3rd location and the Traveler describes the dug-up hole. Albedo then admits he did kill something and buried it in the 3rd location. That something was an impostor that looked exactly like him and intended to kill him. Side note, this impostor is also known as Subject 2 and was killed in a past quest. What happened was that before Rhine-Daughter created Albedo, he created another synthetic being that looked exactly like Albedo. Albedo referred to this other Albedo as Subject 2 and himself as Subject 1. Rhine-Daughter considered Subject 2 a failed experiment, and Durin, another synthetic being created by Rhine-Daughter, ate Subject 2. While Subject 2 looked like Albedo, Durin looked like a dragon. Dvalin, the Dragon of the East, later defeated Durin and Venti sealed Durin's body on Dragonspine. Afterward, Subject 2 escaped Durin's stomach and tried to kill and replace Albedo because he envied Albedo's life. To help in that goal, Subject 2 mutated a whopper flower and gave it the ability to change its form. Albedo refers to this mutated whopper flower as Subject 3. Subject 3 also tried to kill Albedo, but the Traveler and friends killed Subject 3 and Albedo killed Subject 2. The dug-up hole the Traveler found at the 3rd location is where Albedo buried Subject 2. Back at the trial, some knights bring in someone who looks exactly like Prosecutor Hertha. Albedo suggests Prosecutor Hertha is an impostor. The new Hertha that just entered the room asks those present where the longest scar on her body is located. New Hertha says the knights present on the day Hertha received that scar would know the answer. Some knights do know the answer, but Miles, who was present that day and should know the answer, does not. Miles suddenly gets a headache. The new Hertha then tells Prosecutor Hertha to show the scar, but Prosecutor Hertha does not. Albedo says Prosecutor Hertha is the core to a network of her accomplices who are currently being controlled by Durin's life force. Miles is one of these accomplices. Albedo says Prosecutor Hertha can freely change her appearance, but she can't right now as it would affect her control over her accomplices. Suddenly, Miles and others in the room draw their weapons and help Prosecutor Hertha escape. Everyone not controlled by Prosecutor Hertha give chase, and Albedo explains everything that's happened has been part of his plan. They head outside and it seems monsters are attacking the city along with more imposters and more citizens under Durin's control. Albedo explained earlier that Durin is a synthetic being and cannot die. His heart is on Dragonspine and continues to beat even now, growing stronger every day. The monsters attacking Mondstadt are all from Dragonspine and were influenced by Durin's growing life force. Albedo was monitoring Dragonspine, foresaw the monsters' attack, and worked with the Knights of Favonius to prepare for the inevitable battle. Under Jean's leadership, the Knights now defend the city with an emphasis on subduing and not killing the citizens being controlled. The Traveler and Albedo also help fight and soon run into Venti. Albedo knows Venti is the Anemo Archon and included Venti in his plans. Albedo continues explaining things and says the witnesses who saw him burying bodies actually saw him burying the bodies of imposters he killed. Albedo discovered earlier that people entering Dragonspine were falling under the control of Durin's power, or were devoured and replaced by imposters. As for the human teeth and femur that were found, people devoured by imposters were slowly digested inside them, which is why human remains were found where Albedo buried the imposters. As for why the hole at the third location was empty, Albedo says monsters affected by Durin's power dug out Subject 2 and returned it to Durin's stomach. Durin then absorbed Subject 2 and gained its knowledge and way of thinking, acquiring the desire to kill and replace Albedo. That desire is what drove all the monsters agitated by Durin, imposters spawned by Durin, and people controlled by Durin to attack Mondstadt and Albedo. As for the fake Hertha, she is actually the revived Subject 2 and seems to have gained the power to change her appearance, as do all the imposters spawned by Durin's power. As for why all the subterfuge and the fake trial were necessary, it wasn't obvious who was being controlled by Durin. Durin's influence was dormant in those being controlled. They needed a way to corner fake Hertha and force her to turn the people under Durin's control violent. This would make it easy to identify and subdue them in a non-lethal way. As for the real Hertha, Albedo actually had her fake her own disappearance in order to bait Subject 2 into replacing her. Subject 2 took the bait and Albedo fed fake evidence to her in order to bait her into bringing the case against him. They then proceeded with a fake trial and the Traveler's investigation in order to pressure and corner fake Hertha. After some time, the Knights of Favonius win the battle and successfully defend the city. The Traveler and friends regroup at the Knights of Favonius headquarters and discuss something called a tripartite conference. In the past, Varka, the Grandmaster of the Knights of Favonius, managed to get Venti to facilitate a meeting between Varka, Venti, and the Hexenzirkel. At that meeting, Varka convinced the Hexenzirkel to help Mondstadt in their greatest time of need. Venti now uses the Dodo communication device to call Alice and ask for her help. Alice appears in the form of a Dodoko. Alice agrees to help and tells them to meet at the long table in the basement of the headquarters. The Traveler then heads to Albedo's office at Albedo's direction and sees Mini Durin. Side note, Mini Durin is a character introduced in a prior quest and is the creation of M, another member of the Hexenzirkel. Mini Durin says Albedo plans on killing and reviving Durin, and then merging Durin with Mini Durin. Ideally, this will balance out the evil parts of Durin with the good parts of Mini Durin. Albedo also plans on turning this new being into a synthetic human similar to himself. Mini Durin says he wants to do this. The Traveler then heads to the basement and meets with Alice, Venti, and Albedo. Albedo proposes his plan to Alice, requesting a few materials needed for the alchemical procedure. Alice agrees to help, but only if Albedo can pass the Hexenzirkel's trial. Albedo asks the Traveler to join him in the trial, and she agrees. Alice then shrinks them down and has them fight chess pieces. They defeat the chess pieces, and another member of the Hexenzirkel named Barbaloth Trismegistus arrives and makes them go through a second trial fighting more chess pieces. Side note, Mona is Barbaloth's student. They pass the second trial and Alice returns them to normal size. The Traveler and Albedo then head to Dragonspine where they retrieve the core of Durin's heart, which should kill off the rest of Durin's body. They return to Mondstadt, and a few days later the Windblume Festival begins. During the festival, Albedo uses his newly acquired ingredients and alchemical arrays drawn around Mondstadt to perform an alchemic ritual and turn Mini Durin into a synthetic human. After the ritual, Albedo confirms it was a success and advises them to let Mini Durin rest. Albedo then talks about his past and how his mother, Rheindotter, sent him to Mondstadt. Since living here, he's made friends and learned a lot about life. Albedo also mentions that Rheindotter devoured and merged with Naberius, the ruler of life. Albedo then says he needs to report to Jean and leaves. Venti shows up and delivers a gift from the Hexenzirkel to the Traveler as a reward for passing their trial. And that is the end of this quest in this video. If you liked what you've seen here, please like, comment, and subscribe.